this is what I have come around on for Cal Arndt going into his senior year. And I wrote it on my trusty little whiteboard here. This is my player comp for Cal Arndt, Cam Scatabo. Because to me, they're virtually the same player.
Hello and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here as every week with my good friend Ryan Wallace, and we're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. This week marked the annual Trek West for the Sharp Performance Top Prospect Camp, held this year at Bethany College in Lindsborg, Kansas. We'll talk a little bit about some of our favorite players who are in attendance and have an interview with Kansas offensive line commitment Kaden Snyder, who is on hand. As always, if you like what you're hearing, comment below, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. Speaking of which, we should be a little bit easier to find now on Apple or Spotify with our own specific audio channel through KCSN. So you have a consistent place to find us every week, listen to the show, and help us continue to grow and get in front of more people like you. We'll put a link in the description and on social media. And without further ado, Ryan, it's another 2-alarm week.
Let's go.
Kansas went into this cycle looking to land a big-time talent at the running back spot, and the Jayhawks landed one of the top backs on their board in Hazlitt, Michigan runner Corey Amakari, a 4-star player in the industry-generated 24/7 Sports Composite. Ryan, what stands out about Amakari on tape?
Yeah, well, looking at his tape, I mean, obviously, this is the first time kind of I dove into his film a little bit, but, he lists himself as a sub-11 100-meter guy, and that immediately comes out on tape. But, he's put together pretty well. Like, I thought overall, he's got just a good balance as in terms of his game, whether it be as a rusher, as a receiver, all the things that he does up there in Michigan. One of his favorite clips that I wrote down in my notes, he was like flat-footed at the 35-yard line in his junior film, and he kind of slides to the left. The play's kind of broken down, but essentially the point is he's flat-footed at the 35-yard line, and then hits the accelerator. Like everybody else is coming at him, has a step up on him from the defensive standpoint. He's sliding to his left, flat-footed, and then goes, yeah, I guess that hole's not going to come around for me there in the offensive line. I'll just go up the sideline. And takes off. So really underrated, I thought, from a balance standpoint too, Kevin, in terms of like how he can absorb. But also, this, there's so many guys that want to do the make you miss, right? That want to juke. And sometimes they find themselves off balance when they do it. Yep. Corey is not one of those guys. I thought his balance was tremendous. 7th on Kansas's commitment list, according to 24/7 Sports. 2nd, according to On3. Kevin, I might side with On3. He might be outside of like J.J. Dunnigan, maybe Drayden Punt, like top 3 of my favorite commitments in this class so far.
I'd toss Landon Anderson in there too. I think Landon Anderson is the guy that I might actually have number 2 after J.J. Dunnigan. But yeah, one of the things I like about him a lot is what he shows as a receiver, and it's not as a receiver out of the backfield, Ryan. They line him up at wide receiver, like toss him out there at X, have him run crossing routes and post routes, and he does really well in those areas. I'm interested to see what Jim Zabrowski can kind of dial up there. Kansas now has 16 commitments in this 2026 class, with that class ranking 9th nationally, according to 24/7 Sports. The Jayhawks weren't the only local.
One more thing, Kevin. I should have jumped in there a second ago, but also one more thing that I think is important for you and I to touch on, that I know that the beat writers for KU have probably already touched on, but for anybody outside the loop, myself included, up until today, right? Hazlitt, where Corey goes to high school, is like 10 minutes from East Lansing.
Yeah.
Plays on the same high school team as Jonathan Smith's son, the head coach at Michigan State, and KU beats out the Spartans.
He's
So I
a
mean, like
Michigan State legacy too.
that's huge. Like
Yeah.
significant win. Good player. Like would have been a good win, as you and I talked about, just in terms of what we saw on tape. But then you add in that, and it's like, man, this is a good pull for KU.
Speaking of good players, Missouri added one this past week as well.
Fired up.
The Tigers added St. Louis University safety Keenan Harris, himself a 4-star player in the 24/7 Sports Composite this last Friday. Ryan, I think Missouri got a stud here.
This is an interesting one, Kevin, because I mean, this is a guy who, in his time at SLU has gone from like what 6 foot 185 to I've seen him listed up close to like approaching 220 pounds now,
Yep.
like 6'2". And so what jumps out again about Keenan is, he's a former like nickelback wide receiver who has all of those attributes that will then become a collegiate and a senior, at least for the Junior Bills, linebacker. So like at wide receiver, he reminds me of like Antoine Goodley when they throw him out there, the old Baylor guy that was like, 5'11", 220, but was just a ridiculous athlete. Well, Keenan won't do that in college in Columbia, but he's going to be a heck of a linebacker because he's just so comfortable in space. And I think when you think about this from Missouri standpoint, they've got to be really hopeful, Kevin, that Keenan Harris will kickstart what could be more to come in the St. Louis area in this class. They've only got 2 commitments right now, and I know one player decommitted already, but if Keenan Harris can in any way, shape, or form help them with a Titan Davis at DeSmet, help them with Jacob Eberhardt at Kirksville, with a Nick McClellan at CBC, then this becomes, an even better get than it is just Keenan Harris by himself.
I 100% agree. And, obviously, Missouri somewhat panned, losing one of the top players in the entire country from right there. Nick's going to Miami. And so when you look at that and you start looking at, okay, I don't want to say picking up the pieces, Ryan, because it is one guy in Jackson Cantwell. But at the same time, when you start saying, okay, what can you do to sort of salvage this in-state class and excel in this in-state class? I think you made a really good point about cleaning up in St. Louis. You find a way to maybe get Ronell Johnson in that group as well. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you're cooking with gas. Harris right now marks the second commitment for Missouri in this class, joining Pennsylvania quarterback Gavin Sidwar. And Ryan, while Kansas State didn't add anybody in the past week, it's safe to say the Wildcats aren't exactly tiptoeing through the recruiting waters right now. They have a big official visit weekend coming up.
Yeah, I mean, normally we would just talk about alerts here, but I thought that, whether it was KU, K-State, or Missouri, in this case it is K-State, when you get the number of visitors on campus for a single weekend, it's worth at least us alluding to it because there could be more alarms to come. And you mentioned Ronell Johnson, who you see there on your screen from a Missouri standpoint. He will be on campus in Manhattan this weekend. One of like double-digit guests. I think it's like 13 or 14 prospects that are going to be in town. Ronell Johnson is obviously very high on their list. He's our number 1 player here on KCSN from the Kansas City, Missouri side in 2026. Tucker Ashford is another defensive end that I know K-State would love to get out of Texas. They're going to try and kind of win him over this weekend. Number of other players. Some of my favorites that are going to be visiting this weekend. Justin Morales is an offensive lineman out of Tennessee that I really like on tape. Prince Jean is an offensive athlete out of Valdosta, Georgia, that's making the trek up. He's got offers from Georgia, Alabama. Team fun tape for sure for Prince Jean. Cedric Addison, another Georgian running back that can absolutely fly. And maybe one of my favorites that's kind of flying under the radar. Granted, I mean, his prospect rating from a lot of the recruiting sites would say otherwise, but Julian Manson is a top 5 player out of Iowa that I don't know where the heck you put him if you're K-State or wherever he ends up, positionally speaking. But man, that kid is a blast to watch. So we will see if we get more sirens behind me for K-State. They've got 4 already in this class, but if you know anything about how Chris Kleiman operates, how Lance Leipold and his staff have chosen to operate, not only in this class, but in previous classes, they try and get that foundation, the bulk of that high school class, somewhat set, right? Heading into June or certainly exiting June for K-State, this is a big weekend for them to kind of set themselves up to continue to do that. So then in the fall, they can kind of really set their sights on the transfer portal and any other kind of lingering pieces that they need to fill holes with.
Don't be surprised if that siren does wind up setting off a few times here over the upcoming weeks. With that, it's time for our player profiles, where we take a look at one player from Kansas and one player from KC Mo who are flying under the radar a bit, but maybe shouldn't be. Ryan, you had Missouri a week ago, so you'll head back to Kansas for this week's pick.
Yeah, and I'm going with a guy that has been lying under the radar. I've kind of been waiting to give him the spotlight because I think he's very deserving of it. Benji Burton out of Olathe East. He's 6'4", 200 pounds as a junior, 42 tackles, 2 interceptions, but he also had 16 rushes for over 7 yards a carry and 7 catches for almost 10 yards per catch. So the thing that I love about Benji is obviously you see 6'4", 200 and you're like, okay, immediately, where can we project this kid as an athlete? And when you turn on the tape, you see immediately they're comfortable playing him at cornerback. I think he's going to develop into a kid that would be a phenomenal safety because he's got really, really good hands as a DB, plucks the ball out of the air with ease. He's not a chest catcher, but he's also a contact initiator. I mean, this is a guy that I think closes space in a hurry. He's got the great wingspan, but it's not just kind of him lunging for tackles, right? He's going to fight through contact, fight off and shed blockers with ease. And then, like I said, he is going to be the one that's initiating those tackles. He's a fierce guy and a powerful presence when he does make contact. What's interesting about Benji, Kevin, is, right now the offers are only Benedictine and Lincoln, which is a D2 school. I'm surprised by that. And he strikes me as we're kind of on the cusp of camp season as a kid that could really blossom at some camps and really catch a number of coaches' eyes. I reached out to Benji. It sounds like he will be camping at KU, will be camping at K-State, North Dakota State as well, and then an Army Bowl combine as well that might get him more kind of national to regional attention outside of just those 3 schools that I mentioned. So sounds like K-State's in a fairly decent spot, but also KU and North Dakota State are equal in their level of interest for him too. So maybe he turns some heads with them as well. Are we talking scholarship? I don't know. I think it'll depend a lot on his speed, how he tests one-on-ones, but there's so much to like about his game, so much to like about him off the field too. 3.9 GPA, part of the Athletics Advisory Council, which is kind of what they put together. Each high school in the Olathe district kind of has their chosen athletes that will represent them kind of in a student council type role. And he's one of Olathe East members. So a really good, person off the field too. 3-sport athlete. Twin brother Milo is like a stud top 10, fringe top 5 baseball player in this class for 2026, who's already committed to Missouri. So like some pretty athletic bloodlines going on here. So I just think Benji is a player that I've been really intrigued by since kind of last season ended. And I am really, really excited to see where things go here in the next month for him.
Well, Ryan, I am kind of a fan of defensive linemen. And so when I have a chance to pick one, I'm usually going to do it. In KC Mo, I've had my eye on Romy Still at North Kansas City for a little bit. I think he's a guy that could play on either line, depending on the scheme. He's playing sort of that 4-5 technique on defense right now, and on offense, you see him pop at offensive tackle. But the main thing that jumps out on both sides of the ball, Ryan, this is a big frame guy who really shows motor, whether that's finishing blocks, taking guys down, whether that's finishing plays and getting off blocks on defense. I think the motor really jumps off the tape. And when you look at the physical dimensions, he's got, being a guy that's 6'4", 270, 275 pounds, having that, 6'9.5" or right around their wingspan. He's got a big body, and all of those things are good deals. You'll see him here, come through and just absolutely rip up a run play. I want to put you in the coach's chair for a minute, Ryan, and just sort of ask you, what side of the ball do you prefer him on? Because I like him, I think, on the defensive line side, but at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see somebody take a look at him and say, hey, we can do something with a guy that mobile, that tough, that physical at an interior offensive line spot.
Well, I know, he's training with a friend of the show, Michael Rose-Ivy.
Really?
And so obviously I think, judging by that, I would lean to guess that maybe he prefers defense, or that's kind of where he's played, where he feels most comfortable. And he's been working a little bit on his explosiveness.
Sure.
Because there might be a little bit of lack of that burst, right? At least if he's looking for the top offers. That's why I would lean offensive line for him, because he's a kid. You mentioned the motor. That was one of the things in my notes. He's immensely powerful and a second team all conference wrestler at that as well. All of those things, yes, they translate well to defense, but I like him on offense because so many times when we go to camps or we're going to combines, we hear coaches, specifically offensive line coaches, that are constantly saying, move your feet. Move your feet. It's guys that kind of just get stuck standing there and they want to just push with the upper body, and they forget, I need to use my lower half. Romy still is not the kind of guy that forgets to use his lower half. His feet are constantly moving. He's a guy that for 275 pounds, Kevin, I think plays like he's 250. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think you get him up to 300 pounds. You use his pretty good agility, right? And the wingspan to, push the blockers off from an offensive line perspective. He's already got the footwork down. I like him as an interior offensive lineman.
You see the wrestling background really come off, with the way he deals with leverage.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like he wins every leverage battle. You brought up the Michael Rose-Ivy stuff in those clips where you watch him moving around. Obviously, he's not wearing pads in those clips, but it does seem like he's moving a little bit better now than maybe he did a year ago. And so I think that's something to watch as a senior. Coach Joyner does a great job with those guys over there as well. Another plus, he's carrying a 3.5 GPA. So somebody that I think, again, heading into camp season, I think if he handles this the right way and says, hey, maybe I'm even coming in as a defensive lineman, I want to show myself there, but also the offensive line coach and pass rush drills is yelling out, I need a guard. I might think about,
there you go.
Like, hey, maybe I slide over and take a rep or two. And I think he's got a pretty bright future ahead of him. We'll break down some of our top players from Sharp Performance's top prospect camp and have our interview with Salina's central offensive tackle and Kansas commitment Kaden Snyder here in a minute. But first, it's time to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. The 2024-25 athletic season is wrapping up, but that doesn't mean your support for your favorite school has to. Home Field has some great deals on all kinds of college gear to keep you showing off your school spirit through the summer. Kansas State, and Missouri currently have more than 40 items to choose from, so head on over to homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code link below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Success in real estate takes more than vision. It takes the right financial partner. When someone takes something rundown and turns it into something great, that's called a comeback story, like Brain Group. They take distressed properties here in KC, completely rework them, and then turn them into valuable real estate. But that kind of work needs the right bank behind it. Enter Emprise Bank. They're not about cookie-cutter loans. They saw Brain Group's vision, backed them, and now they're making big moves in Kansas City real estate. Talk about your partner in possible. Emprise doesn't do one-size-fits-all financing. They invest in potential and back growth. Visit emprisebank.com/KC to learn more. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Folks, it's playoff time, and if you're still just watching games, then you're missing out. With Pick 6 from DraftKings, you can turn your hoops knowledge into real cash. Just make your picks, track your score, and if you hit all 6, you're looking at bigger payouts than Prize Picks flex plays. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competition, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. And right now, new customers can get $50 in bonus picks with just a $5 entry. Here's what you got to do. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code KCSN. That's code KCSN to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 bonus picks that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Tuesday marked the annual Sharp Performance Top Prospect Combine, often in Salina, this time in Lindsborg, Kansas, where a number of top football players from across the state converged on one spot. Afterwards, I went over to Old Studio.
Yeah, there it is. Show it off.
Couldn't see the shirt. Tried pickled herring for the first time. Found out probably not really for me, but the Stuga is known for its cold beers and terrific sandwiches, and they hit home runs on both of those fronts. Also, shout out to I believe it's Blacksmith Coffee there on the sort of the main drag. Excellent coffee there too. So good.
Look at you, shout out Lindsborg.
Good time had by all in Lindsborg, Kansas. I think one of the biggest values for us, Ryan, from Sharp Top Prospect isn't necessarily seeing the guys that we've had eyes on before. You want to see younger guys who are on their way up, or you want to lay eyes on maybe a small town player that maybe we haven't been able to see in person. And while we definitely had a few of those, and we'll talk about those, the first guy I wanted to talk about is the exact opposite. He's a guy we've seen a whole bunch, Ryan, including on Friday nights at KC Varsity, now at Sharp. And it's someone who he's performed well every time we've seen him, and that's Aquinas running back Cal Arndt.
Yeah, I mean, Cal at this point is a household name, not just in the Kansas City Metro, but I think throughout Kansas. When you rush for 2,000 yards, something that's only been done, I think, one other time at St. Thomas Aquinas, en route to, really, I mean, putting that offense on his back, so to speak, right? And that's not to take away anything from what Aquinas had last season. But I mean, Cal Arndt was the heartbeat of that offense, and to take them to a state championship single-handedly, as a guy that is undersized, right? At least in terms of height, I think says all you need to know about Cal Arndt. And I got in a conversation with somebody about Cal Arndt versus kind of Tank Young. And a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now, and it was like, well, what did I think? And I'll just be honest, like, you have to remember Tank Young, when he racked up all those yards for Aquinas, had one of the most dominating offensive lines we've seen in KCK, like, in a long time in front of him. And so, all due respect to Tank, I don't know if he does what Cal did with Cal's offensive line. All due respect to Cal's offensive line. There's a couple guys on that line that we really like. Yeah. But again, like, they aren't, Joe Mahalski. They aren't, Jaden Roberts, right? So again, it's a feather in Cal's cap to do what he did without kind of what you would think of as like the Tank Young St. Thomas Aquinas offensive line. But here's what I want to say about Cal Arndt, because what we saw from him last year on tape, what we saw from him when we saw him in the game against Rockhurst, right, is this combination of B and B. He is my B and B guy. And I wrote it down in my notes. He is bounce and he is brawn, Kevin, because he's a guy that will, PFF does a thing about like forced missed tackles. He would have just as many of those as he would have yards after contact. Like, he can make you miss, or he can drag you and, force you to go to the laundromat after the game because of the grass stains that you're going to have. I mean, you see it over and over in all these clips. And so I say all that because this is what I have come around on for Cal Arndt going into his senior year. And I wrote it on my trusty little whiteboard here. This is my player comp for Cal Arndt. Cam Scatabo. Because to me, they're virtually the same player. I think in terms of maybe make you miss, I think Cal might have a little bit more. In terms of like running through guys, maybe Cam has a little bit more. So going into 2026, we're going to copyright this right here on Verbal Commitment. It is now Cal Scadaboo.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
It is Cal Scadaboo from now on. That was said here first on Verbal Commitment. Anyway, long-winded answer. I really like what Cal Arndt's game is, and I think, taking it back to the Tank Young comparison, Kevin, do you think that he can and should probably be placed in a higher level than Tank ended up at Northwest Missouri State, or because of everything we've seen in the transfer portal and roster limitations, that maybe Cal's going to have to start kind of at the same level that Tank did and inevitably, hopefully, work his way up through the transfer portal?
Yeah, I think maybe, he should be a level up. And I think one of the things, too, that really stands out about him, and it was not quite a year ago, probably 9 months ago, that we had Joseph Potts on our show, Cal Arndt being one of his guys, and he talked about the fact that Kid is an absolute demon in the weight room. I mean, the stuff that you see on tape, that comes from somewhere. That comes from the work that he puts in to really throw some weight around, be really strong, and the hard work that he does. I think he's probably a little bit ahead of where Tank Young was at the same time. And it sounds weird to say that because I think Tank Young was overranked a little bit at this stage. And he had that great offensive line. I think ESPN even wound up keeping Tank Young as like a top 5 player in Kansas. I think he wound up being like number 2 and even ahead of, some guy named Devin Neal, which we won't get into that. But I want to say all that to say it sounds weird to say because Tank had all those bona fides, but at the same time, if you really knew Tank at that time and you really know Cal right now, I do think that, Cal's maybe somebody that should start up maybe another level or so from where Tank is heading into college.
Agree.
Another player that we've seen before, we actually saw first through Sharp, but on his 7-on-7 team, and that's Cooper McGowan. Like Cal, we've talked about Cooper on this show before, but he always seems to follow the same formula, Ryan. It was the same on Tuesday. He shows up. People are impressed with the way he looks on the hoof, his tall, longer frame walking around. They see him doing the odd footwork or pad drill, maybe that he hasn't even done before, and they're kind of like, well, he may be a defensive end. I didn't love, the feet were maybe a little clunky there. And then the passing drills and coverage, and the coverage shows up, and the ball skills show up. And little by little, everybody who's there starts to say, well, maybe this guy isn't an edge player. Maybe he can play out there in space.
Yeah, we've shown his tape before on the show, so we kind of refrained this time. But his performance in your eyes was so good, it still deserved mentioning on the show again this week. And because, again, it's what you just said. It's what he does. We talked about earlier in the show with Keenan Harris. What Cooper is able to do and how comfortable he is in space, I think, is what's going to attract a lot of college attention. And, when last time we spoke to him, right, there was Iowa State was kind of, interested in getting him to camp. I would imagine both the local schools in KU and K-State are interested in getting him to camp. And I think it's going to be that kind of like, how much do you see that he can grow, right, in terms of whether he can be, I don't think he can be a defensive end at that level, but maybe an outside linebacker. Or, is it one of those situations where he needs to start maybe at a lower level before we have time to groom them? Because there are some things of his game from like run stopping, more of the physical attributes that you talked about, where it almost seems like he needs to grow into his body and develop his body a little bit more. But again, all that to say, it's like, there's going to be a coach out there that's going to say, I'm willing to get past all that because everything about his game from a defensive pass standpoint is so kind of like above average and things that you just can't teach with his length and the wingspan.
Does he have a little Keyshawn Elliott to him? I mean, just in terms of baby gazelle kind of growing into his body still. I just remember hearing some of the same things from college coaches talking about Keyshawn and kind of why he fell through the cracks maybe a little bit in terms of guys saying, well, I don't really know is he an edge? Is he a linebacker? I'm not really sure. His body's a little awkward. Maybe the athleticism isn't all the way there because his feet are kind of tripping. What do you think?
Maybe. I mean, Keyshawn was so much more physically stout, physically built. A guy that I kind of remember being caught as like, what is he? And again, maybe a little bit smaller, but a little bit more physically put together, was Isaiah Childs from Wamego.
Sure.
That one kind of, I remember, like, again, one of those instances where there was a lot of things to like, but also some things that needed to grow. I think he ended up at Akron, and I can't remember where he went from then on. But again, I'm pulling for Cooper. I know you are too, because again, in a different couple years ago, in the past, before there was the portal, this is absolutely a kid that, I think higher levels would have taken a chance on from a walk-on standpoint. And so as much as we want to say, man, it's a shame, a couple years ago, like he would have made like, a K-State or a KU level right out of the gate. The benefit now, though, is that he can go get developed and hopefully get put on scholarship right away, not have to go through a walk-on process. And then if he is good enough, he will end up, at the higher level. And I think from it, at least again, from how he reacts and how he defends the pass, he can absolutely get to that level one day.
Feels like a kid that 20 years ago would go to Butler County Community College, Hutch, Fort Scott, place like that, pop out 2 years later looking like a totally different human, and wind up going to the Big 12. And so we are really rooting for Cooper here. Let's get to another guy that we've seen previously, but this was a really nice sort of feather in his cap follow-up performance for him, and that's Evan Middleton from Manhattan. I'm going to put cards on the table right here, Ryan. I think college coaches are behind the curve on this one. You have a guy who's a high school defensive end who has that kind of build and length at 6'3", 215 or so, but he's been working out at linebacker. He did that again at Sharp. He did it at Casey Varsity when we saw him. And Ryan, he can really, really run. He runs well for a linebacker. You put him at defensive end and say, hey, this is a defensive end, I think it stands out that much more.
A lot of the clips that I plucked here are from some of the biggest games of Manhattan's season too, which is where he seemed to shine the most, right? You see the state title game. He was absolutely tremendous against Derby. I mean, that was when I thought he kind of caught you and I's attention right away. Here's another playoff game with Wichita Northwest, right, where you get to see him come off and be athletic and block a punt. I think that he does a little bit of everything, right? And that's going to be, to you, you already said it, kind of a feather in his cap, because we knew that he was powerful. We saw him kind of line up at times on the inside, and you get to see him kind of use his length, and you're like, man, there's good pursuit there. You get to see the developing power and how his body's maturing through the weight room. But now you're getting to see him say, oh yeah, I can also like cover in space, right? And again, like, to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, you and I were at the KC Varsity Combine with him a couple weeks ago, watching him go through drills with the linebackers, right? And Evan's telling you, like, well, I'm going to run with the linebackers today because, like, I play defensive end in the fall, but, I think the staff in Manhattan feels like I could really, help them in the fall, but also help myself if I just kind of go through linebackers and learn to play in space and do more things as a hybrid. And so we're standing there, and there was a college coach. I don't remember where from. That's besides the point. But we're kind of watching Evan, and he's kind of like, he kind of like turned to you and was like, I think he's probably better suited for defensive end, or something like to that effect of like, that's a good looking linebacker, like a big kid that moves pretty well. And I think you were like, yeah. What if I told you he's really a defensive end and this is just kind of like what he's doing on the weekends? And like the coach was like, whoa, like I like him even more now. So he's the son of Matthew Middleton, the wide receivers coach at K-State. I say that because I think that's going to help, hopefully expand some connections, right? Over time. Hopefully it's this summer. If it does go into the fall, the more that I think word gets out and they can kind of, bounce some things off of Matthew's brain, and you get that kind of like, oh, he's growing up in a coach's household type thing. More and more reason to give Evan Middleton a look. And I think he's bound for a huge year with Manhattan this fall.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. So we talked about small school guys we wanted to got an eye on. How about Hillsboro's Josiah Gooch? This is a guy who has been on our radar. To pull back the curtains, we have a spreadsheet, and we just, as we notice guys, we add names, we add, heights, weights. They've got track times. We add that there. We add, information as we get all of that. I feel like I've been looking at Josiah Gooch's name on this spreadsheet, for a long time, right? You're talking about a physical running back and linebacker at 6'1.5", 210 pounds. He does powerlifting in the winter, but then he also runs on the 4x100 team at Hillsboro. He has an offer from Texas State, but after seeing him in person, I think his summer camp schedule immediately becomes one of the ones that I'm going to have a magnifying glass up to see where he goes, because I think he's somebody that could, kind of slide into some more FBS offers.
Yeah, I mean, you've been looking at his name. I feel like I've been kind of rerunning his film for a long time, right? I mean, I love the way that he takes on blockers and then gets to the tackle. And like you said, he's a running back as well, but I feel like his brightest future is probably on defense as a linebacker, because he does break down so well, because he is such a sure tackler. But I mean, again, you see the clip here, he fights through contact not once, but twice, and still kind of is there where he needs to be at the right time, right place, right time type player. But yeah, I thought it was interesting too, when you go to his Twitter profile, he lists future football performance coach as well. And so not only do I like that because it kind of shows just a little bit about who he is and, outside of football, maybe what his passions are. But I also like that if I'm a college coach, because I'm going, this is a kid that we're not going to have to make love the weight room. He's not a guy that we're going to have to push to make sure his alarm is set and we get him here on time. Like, he is going to have fun in the weight room. He's going to get after it. And now, you having seen him in person, you can now verify, because again, there are a lot of these guys in Western Kansas that you and I don't get to put eyes on. And we've been in this game long enough to know that, sometimes 6 foot isn't always 6 foot, or, 6'3" isn't always 6'3", but Josiah does check out, right? And that's good for him, because he's going to go, again, coaches have put on his tape. They probably like it. Now he's going to go and he's going to show up and they're going to go, oh, you are exactly what you said you were. And you're going to do all the things at camp that we already like. It's going to make for a really, really intriguing camp process for him.
Ryan, let's also add a 2027 here. And I want to add, this is somebody that you loved on tape heading into Sharp, and that's Hoisington defensive end Brody Fannensteel. Was it Russell before, right?
It was Russell, yes.
I don't want to spoil future episodes, but we are planning on taking a look at the top 2027s. And Ryan, I'd have to assume he's going to be pretty high up on that list.
I've been chewing on this name as a possible top 10 candidate, and I know it's early on, but man, there is just too much to like about what his sophomore tape. Again, this is sophomore tape that you're looking at here, and I don't care about the level of competition. What he's able to do is just ferocious. And what I wrote down in my notes is he's kind of like a stalker. Like, the way that he stalks his prey, he closes space, but in a very wise manner, as you see in this clip here. Like, he understands the things that he needs to do in terms of, like, where you saw there, like, if I over pursue right here, I'm going to break contain, the quarterback's going to get out. Or I can kind of stalk and maneuver this and get around this blocker and still, get my hand up, force the quarterback to make a decision of, like, do I want to try and throw it through his hand or bring it back down? And I know if that quarterback brings it back down, he's mine. And you see that repeatedly from Fannensteel. I just love the pursuit. I love the frame for a kid that's still just going into his junior year. So apologies to the pride of Russell, our friend, the chili dog, Matt Walters at Kansas State, because I know he's probably disappointed that his alma mater will not have this player for the next 2 years. But this is Hoisington's gain, and I think he will be a name that will attract some major attention out to that area for sure.
Stay tuned to our show, because I'm guessing that's a name you're going to hear quite a bit over the next couple of years. Also at Sharp on Tuesday, we had a chance to catch up with Salinas Central offensive tackle Kaden Snyder, who committed to Kansas earlier this fall. The 4-star talked about why he chose the Jayhawks, how he's doing pursuing his childhood friend Ian Premer, and his expectations for the Mustangs this fall. here with Kansas commitment Kaden Snyder. Kaden, how's the I guess not quite summer, how's the spring going for you?
It's been good. I've gotten a lot stronger. We put a lot of weight on, so that's really all I wanted to do this spring.
It feels like, was it last year that you were overcoming mono a little bit, dropped some weight, and kind of went through camp
mono,
season?
but it was some type of sickness. I went to like 235 and I'm back to 290.
Good deal.
Yep.
We haven't talked to you since your commitment to Kansas, so I guess the question is why Kansas? What was it about the Jayhawks?
It felt like home. I really like Coach Leipold and Coach Ekbalsa, and the commits there right now, they're already my good friends, and we haven't known each other for long, so that helps a lot.
With Coach Ekbalsa, what's his personality like, and what are kind of your interactions like with him?
He's fiery, but he cares about, he wants you to be a family, part of his family, and that's a big thing I look for.
Have they told you where they want you to play? Is it offensive tackle?
It'd be tackle, left tackle, right tackle, either one, yep.
Good deal. You guys have a pair of pretty good tackles at
Yep.
Salina Central right now with
Yep.
you and Warwick.
Yep.
I guess, what are your expectations for this season?
We should be really good. That's what you should expect, but I truly believe we should be a top team in 5A.
I was going to say Salina Central obviously has gone through some periods where you guys have been one of the dominant teams at that level.
Mm-hmm.
State title hopes, maybe?
We could get there. I think we could make a good run, yep.
Now, what's different about this Kansas class a little bit in terms of all the guys becoming Jayhawks, between yourself, JJ,
Yep.
Jalen Mason, Hunter Higgins? It feels like I'm going to forget, people if I keep going, but what is it about you guys, you think?
Most people think Kansas players aren't really like the other people around the country, and I believe that we are, so.
Are you guys pretty close? It seems you guys have a group text going.
Yeah, we got a group chat. Yeah, we're all going on our official visit together.
When are you doing that?
June 6th through 8th.
Okay. Who's the funniest guy in the group chat?
Funniest guy in the group chat? Jack Oots, maybe. He's
Okay.
in Missouri.
Yeah, sure.
Missouri guy. Yeah.
Sure. It's
Corbin Glasgow from Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good deal. And you guys are working on Ian Premer pretty hard. You've known Ian a long time, haven't
Ian's
you?
my good friend, yeah.
Uh,
I really hope to get him, obviously, yeah.
When I was going to say with Ian, did you play baseball growing up? Is that
We were
right?
basketball. We played basketball together. Yeah.
Good deal. For somebody who hasn't seen you play before, how would you describe yourself to him?
Very athletic for my size, fast hands, hard punch.
What are you expecting from the Jayhawks this year?
I expect a good season for them. Definitely improvement from last season. A little bit of a disappointment for them, I would say, but it should be a better year for them.
And then with the official coming up, I know you've been up to campus, but how excited are you to see the facilities when they completely finish, the stadium when it's completely finished, all of those things?
I'm pumped. It's going to be done by, my actual freshman year there, so that should be really cool to be able to be inside there and play and have everything getting ready.
What are you trying to work on right now and improve?
I'd say just my general strength. Just try to get as strong as I can before I get there, and my speed and agility wise.
We appreciate Kaden taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate Jake Sharp having the top prospect combine as he does every year. Getting the kids out for that can't be an easy deal. And thanks to all of you for watching and following along with us here on the Rural Commitment Podcast on KCSN. If you enjoyed watching or listening to us, leave us a comment, like this video, subscribe here on YouTube, or hit us with a 5-star rating if you're listening on an audio platform. If you are, find us at our new home over at Apple and Spotify, linked in the description. And until next time, Ryan Wallace, Cal Scattaboo, Nick Springer behind the scenes, and myself will see you on the trail, and take care.